During their time in orbit, Crew-11 celebrated 25 years of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station. During that time, our unique microgravity laboratory has hosted more than 4,000 experiments from over 5,000 researchers in more than 110 countries, all to help us build the road to the Moon and Mars and understand our universe while helping humanity on Earth. Crew-11 conducted more than 140 unique scientific experiments and technology demonstrations during their stay aboard the orbiting laboratory. Continuing the space station's legacy of groundbreaking science, Crew-11 worked on experiments to understand bone loss and studied bioprinted human tissues to understand or to ensure the health of astronauts on future missions and improve the quality of life for patients on Earth. They worked on the development of long-term storage of cryogenic fluids in space with Earth-bound medical and industrial applications. The team also tested an inflatable capture bag that aims to remove space debris from orbit, protecting future spacecraft and crews, and could also be used to capture samples during exploration missions and enable mining of small asteroids.
Let's dive into some of these experiments and investigations. The MABLE-B study investigates how microgravity affects bone marrow stem cells and their secretion of proteins involved in bone formation and loss. Researchers aim to determine whether blocking a bone loss pathway could help prevent that bone loss. Findings may lead to new strategies for combating bone loss both in space and on Earth. MVP Cell 07 studies how bioprinted liver tissue with blood vessels matures in microgravity, focusing on cell behavior and tissue development. Researchers are examining how space may affect the structure and function of these engineered tissues. Results could help advance space-based production of high-quality tissues and organs for medical use on Earth and support astronaut health on future missions. Capture Bag Demo tests an inflatable debris capture bag on the space station, assessing its opening, closing, and ability to stay airtight in microgravity. This technology could be used to remove space debris from orbit, protecting future spacecraft and crew members, and could also be used to capture samples during exploration missions to the Moon and Mars and enable mining of small asteroids.
Next up is ZBOT-NC. Many spacecraft use cryogenic fuels, which are extremely cold, for propulsion. These fuels must be kept extremely cold to stay liquid, but SpaceX temperature fluctuations can cause them to slowly evaporate and escape the tank. This creates fuel efficiency and mission planning. So ZBOT-NC investigates how specific types of gases affect pressure control in propellant tanks in space. The data collected will help validate models and contribute to the design of more efficient cryogenic fuel storage systems for long-duration missions. Rounding out this list, Bionutrients 3 aims to develop an on-demand method for producing essential nutrients in space using bioengineered yeast, helping maintain crew health on long-duration missions while reducing launch mass. Building on previous studies, it introduces advanced food safety features and tests 3 sample types: yogurt, kefir, and a yeast-based beverage. The project aims to identify a food-safe, genetically engineered organism that remains viable over multiple years to produce a mission-relevant nutrient or biomolecule of interest.
If you've just recently tuned in, we are standing by for the call out of the initiation of our deorbit burn. We're expecting that to begin at 11:51 p.m. Pacific time. This is a 13.5-minute long burn that positions Dragon for its atmospheric reentry and splashdown off the coast of San Diego. So like I mentioned, we are standing by. That should be coming here in just a couple of minutes as we expect that to initiate at 11:51 p.m. Pacific time.
As we await that deorbit burn, which we expect to commence momentarily, just a look at some of the Crew-11 statistics. Their mission will last 167 days by the time they splash down, with 165 days spent on the space station. That means they traveled 2,672 orbits of Earth, which is over 70,856,752 statute miles. We're hearing about 30 seconds until that deorbit burn start. During their time in space, this crew saw a total of 5 arriving vehicles and the departure of 3 vehicles. And right on time, at 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time, we have confirmation that the deorbit burn has begun. This burn is expected to last over 13 minutes. For these return and splashdown operations, the United States Coast Guard, in coordination with SpaceX and NASA, establishes a safety zone to ensure public safety and for the safety of those involved in the recovery operations, as well as the crew aboard the returning spacecraft. Multiple notices are issued to mariners in advance and during recovery operations, and Coast Guard assets may be deployed to discourage boaters from entering the splashdown zones. We want to again stress to all of the public the need to respect this safety zone. Recovering a spacecraft spacecraft from the water is a hazardous operation, and any other boats interfering increases risk to the astronauts in the capsule, the teams working to recover them from the water, and the safety of those that come too close. Now, for the safety of the crew and your own safety, we would love for you to continue joining us on NASA Plus and the SpaceX webcast, because you're going to get the best views of our astronauts on their journey home.
Like Leah said, the best views will be coming to you here on our webcast. However, if you are in the Los Angeles area, the San Diego area there in Southern California, I do encourage you to step outside about 12:30 a.m. as you might be able to see the spacecraft actually re-entering on its way there back to the splashdown site. And if you're lucky, you might even hear a sonic boom. Now, as always, NASA and SpaceX jointly select our splashdown location, and for today, the primary recovery site is there off of the coast of San Diego. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability that Dragon has for the trip home, and of course, the sleep schedule for the returning crew members. We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. For Crew-11 this evening, their journey is going to be about 10.5 hours in total. Of course, getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure that the crew is properly rested for all these dynamic operations. And of course, that would prevent us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them. Trajectory and ballistics experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up with the Dragon as it's coming back to the landing zones. And then we split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities. Okay, so we still have a few minutes left to go here in this deorbit burn. As I mentioned before, this is the transition of the Dragon spacecraft from Earth orbit to atmospheric reentry. This is lining the spacecraft up for its precise splashdown location there off the coast of San Diego. So in a couple minutes, in fact, we expect this deorbit burn to conclude at 12:04 a.m. Pacific time. So we will stand by and await to hear the call for nominal burn. When we hear that, that will confirm completion of this deorbit burn for Dragon Endeavour. As I mentioned earlier, we will hear primarily the SpaceX core, or the Crew Operations and Resource Engineer. That is the primary role in mission control that is responsible for communicating with the Crew-11 spacecraft. That individual is seated there on the left-hand side of your screen. That is SpaceX Hawthorne Mission Control. Also seated there, I believe I see my boss, SpaceX Vice President Bill Gerstenmaier, sitting there in the front row. This group of operators are standing by and monitoring Dragon's progress throughout this burn. Now, this particular maneuver that Dragon Endeavour is performing, this deorbit burn, is utilizing the 4 forward Draco thrusters. We say forward because that indicates that it's basically the language indicating that they're located at the top of the Dragon spacecraft. These 4 Draco thrusters, this is the last time that they will be utilized for this mission. This deorbit burn will last for a total of about 13.5 minutes. Okay, we still got about 6 minutes left in this deorbit burn. As we wait for a conclusion of the deorbit burn, let's talk about Dragon Endeavour's journey from the space station so far. Shortly after its separation, Dragon used its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, or departure burns, and those were done to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon also executed a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location. Following the phasing burns, Dragon is now completing its deorbit, which will be followed by reentry and splashdown. During the deorbit sequence, several things will happen, including trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, as well as deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, ultimately followed by splashdown.
Again, if you're just joining us, this is the live coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission return to Earth. We are currently in the deorbit burn, which started at 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern Time. It's expected to last approximately 13 minutes, so we still have about 4 more minutes left of this burn. Once it's complete, Dragon will then proceed to jettison the trunk before it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, exposing the heat shield on the base of the spacecraft and protecting the crew as they make their way toward the splashdown location. And we are anticipating splashdown at 3:41 a.m. Eastern, 2:41 a.m. Central Time off the coast of California.
All right, we have just over a minute remaining in this 13.5-minute burn. This is the deorbit burn. This is the final burn for the forward Draco thrusters. It is placing Dragon on its final trajectory to the splashdown location off the coast of California. We're targeting one of our 3 pre-designated locations. This one will be just off the coast of San Diego. Shortly after the burn concludes, we should hear a call out indicating that the burn was nominal. This would be good news and letting us know that we are continuing with progression of our milestones. After deorbit burn, we will jettison the trunk and have atmospheric reentry. All right, so there's about 10 seconds left in this burn, so we're going to stand by and listen for that call out.
Dragon, SpaceX, deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Trunk separation initiated.
Dragon copies. Nominal deorbit burn. Trunk separation process initiated.
Okay, good words there from SpaceX Core, letting our Crew-11 team know that the deorbit burn was as expected. Now, to prepare for these upcoming events, Dragon is currently doing a couple of things autonomously, such as isolating the thermal control system fluid loops from the radiator. This system is what will help keep the internal temperature of Dragon comfortable during the crew's reentry. Dragon is also initiating separation of the claw mechanism, which will terminate all data, power, and fluid connections between the spacecraft and the trunk, and that is all done in preparation for trunk separation.
Nominal trunk jettison.
Dragon copies.
All right, great news there. We heard the call out for successful trunk separation. So that means that telemetry is looking good. The nitrox system is primed for cabin and suit cooling, and the heat shield is exposed and ready for atmospheric entry. Now, since we separated the trunk, we are no longer able to generate any new power, but we don't need to since we're coming on home and Dragon has more than enough battery power already stored. So the next milestone that we have coming up is nose cone closure. We expect that at approximately 12:09 a.m., so here in about 3 minutes. The nose cone is at the top of the spacecraft, and it is the structure that protects the docking system as well as the guidance, navigation, and control system. We'll be using 12 hooks to lock and secure the nose cone prior to its atmospheric entry.
That's right. We are standing by for nose cone closure, expected just a few minutes from now. And as you can tell, things are picking up a little bit more quickly as we prepare for splashdown. Again, expecting that to come at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. So right now, Dragon is inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters. We just used those to complete the deorbit burn, meaning they will not fire again, and ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone for reentry. The vehicle has, we are also anticipating it to initiate the nitrox suit purge. This helps keep our crew members, Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, Kimya Yui, and Oleg Platonov, cool and comfortable during reentry, which we're expecting in about 20 minutes. At this point, the nose cone, we are standing by for that closure to begin, protecting that forward hatch for reentry. And the crew will be able to use their screens to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by that set of hooks. Underneath the nose cone is also the hatch that the crew members use to ingress and egress, also known as enter and exit the International Space Station while the spacecraft was docked. Now, once they splash down, they'll be using the side hatch to exit the spacecraft and onto the recovery ship. That side hatch is what they used to enter Dragon back in August when they launched to the space station.
For those of you that have just recently joined us for Crew-11 splashdown, we have completed the deorbit burn that set Dragon on its precise trajectory back to our splashdown location off the coast of San Diego, California. We've also jettisoned the trunk, and we've just closed the nose cone. So these are the final physical changes for the Dragon spacecraft prior to its atmospheric entry. And we expect that entry period to begin about 12:30 a.m. Pacific time, so in about 20 minutes or so. We also expect the crew to receive their final entry briefing. This is where the SpaceX core will communicate any changed details, such as timeline shifts to the anticipated loss of signal and acquisition of signal, as well as the entry period. We should also find out what the wave height and wind speed is there at the splashdown location. But when I was coming into work this evening, I did see some stars outside, so hopefully that's a good indication that we've got some smooth seas out there awaiting the crew.
As we are in the process of the hooks and latches driving to secure and close the nose cone, just a recap of what we've seen so far tonight. The spacecraft undocked from the International Space Station earlier today. This Crew-11, spent 165 days aboard the orbiting laboratory, but 167 days in space altogether, if you count the time they have spent getting to and from the space station. At 1:51 a.m. Central Time, 2:51 a.m. Eastern, the spacecraft executed the deorbit burn. That was an approximately 13-minute-long burn, committing the spacecraft to coming home and splashing down off the coast of California. We're anticipating that splashdown in less than 30 minutes from now, 2:41 a.m. Central. After the nose cone closes, we will begin seeing our reentry process, and part of that is a communications blackout. We lose communication with the spacecraft. This is an anticipated and tracked milestone as they go through reentry and plasma builds up around the spacecraft itself. We do regain that communications shortly thereafter, and following that, we anticipate seeing drogue parachutes deployed. There are 2 of those, as well as 4 main parachutes, slowing down the spacecraft to a splashdown time of, again, 2:41 a.m. Central Time. So we're just standing by for confirmation of nose cone closure.
Dragon SpaceX, nose cone secured for entry.
Dragon.
Okay, we heard good news there. The nose cone is closed and secured, locked in position, ready for atmospheric reentry. Now, as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon has begun to inject cooled nitrox, or nitrogen-oxygen mixture, into the air, being delivered directly into the suits worn by the crew. Again, this is what will allow our crew members to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach up to 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the heat shield is pointing forward, essentially leading Dragon to our landing site just off the coast of San Diego, which is important as it will be doing a lot of the work during this reentry. So let's talk a bit more about the heat shield. Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. Now, the first-gen PICA was actually initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system. SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA X, which was the second-gen product.
Dragon SpaceX for entry briefing. Report when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
Okay, starting with timeline. We're completely on time for the previously briefed timeline. Splashdown period displays at 0841 Zulu. COM blackout start 0828. Blackout end 0835. How copy?
Copy, we are on time for 0841 splashdown per the timeline. COM blackout start 0828. COM blackout end 0835.
That's a good readback. We have a nominal vehicle status. We're tracking an on-target arrival to San Diego with pristine weather conditions for splashdown. Recovery team is on site and ready to support.
Dragon copies. Nominal vehicle, excellent weather, and teams are ready to support.
And with that, please report when tablets are secure, restraints are tightened, and visors are down.
SpaceX Dragon, tablets secure, restraints tightened, and visors down.
SpaceX copies all.
All right, so as expected, that was our entry brief to the crew, letting them know that there were actually no updates to the anticipated timeline this morning. So that's great news. Everything is looking well on timed with our anticipated timeline. So as we mentioned before, we expect our anticipated loss of signal to occur around 12:28 a.m. Pacific. So in just about 8 minutes from now, we will have, we anticipate that signal to be regained, or anticipate that signal to be acquired again at 12:35 a.m. Pacific time. Now, sometimes we are able to hail the crew a little bit earlier than that. Sometimes we get those communications back. And then once again, splashdown at 12:41 a.m. Pacific. So again, if you're in Southern California, head outside and look up. Now, let's get back to talking a little bit about the heat shield. As you know, we're talking about this signal loss, and that's due to part of what's going on with that heat shield. So SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop the second generation heat shield product, and that was actually used on all of the Dragon 1 CRS missions that resupplied the space station on 20 missions. Then fast forwarding to PICA 3.0, that was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal properties that optimized the heat shield and drove down cost and mass. So the remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. That's another class of thermal protection, which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during the reentry phase, and that's to ensure the structural capabilities of the spacecraft are maintained. Now, while Dragon will experience temperatures over 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit peak during those peak unique reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection systems, or TPS as you hear it called, coupled with the environmental control and life support, or ECLIS, that system pressurized will be pressurizing the interior, and all those combined will ensure that the crew will stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon,
okay, so
opening seat 3 visor just to adjust glasses.
Dragon, SpaceX, can you repeat?
Temporarily opening seat 3 visor to adjust glasses.
Copy, adjusting glasses. Your go for that.
Okay, so that was important to note there because our commander, Zena Cardman, had already reported back that all visors were down and in the locked position ready for atmospheric reentry, but one of our crew members had to adjust their glasses. So she did a good job there in reporting back to SpaceX Crew to let them know that one of the crew members had to reopen momentarily.
Visors are down.
We copy. Visors are down. 5 minutes until predicted COM blackout. See you on the other side at 0835.
Copy 0835. Talk to you soon.
Okay, so as we have been saying, everything that Dragon and the crew on board does is carefully choreographed, not just the maneuvers that the spacecraft is executing, but the communications between our crew here on the ground and our crew in space. So, Leah, we can see all of that being perfectly demonstrated with what's going on now.
Absolutely, and we are standing by for the reentry portion when we expect to lose communications with the spacecraft, but we will regain that communication after they have begun re-entering the atmosphere. So once Dragon has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue chutes, followed by the 4 main chutes to guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since launching in August. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they are at the right speed and altitude. The spacecraft velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. You're getting a live look inside the cabin right now. That's Crew-11 preparing for their re-entry period. Again, having spent 165 days aboard the space station, and when they splash down, capping a 167-day mission. Before they can splash down, though, a little bit more about those parachutes. The next that we will see deploy will be the main parachutes. There are 4 of those. They deploy at approximately 119 miles per hour, or I should say when the spacecraft is traveling about 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 65,000 feet. And at splashdown, Dragon is traveling approximately 16 miles per hour, which is a pretty good deceleration from the about 17,500 miles per hour that they were traveling while in Earth orbit with the International Space Station. Now, the highest G load the crew will experience during re-entry is approximately 3 to 5 Gs, so about 3 to 5 times what we are experiencing right now standing on Earth. This view is over the shoulder of Commander Zena Cardman and pilot Mike Fink of the Crew-11 spacecraft. In this view, you can see their crew displays. They're able to monitor everything happening with the spacecraft. However, all the next milestones should be completely autonomous and hands-off for the crew.
And we can preview the fact.
We just heard that the crew is in entry attitude, and we are anticipating losing this view and losing our audio communications with the crew in just a minute or so as they enter this entry interface. They'll be traveling and experiencing heat outside the capsule at approximately 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. And as they are traveling and re-entering Earth's atmosphere, a plasma builds up around the capsule that prevents us from communicating back and forth with the crew. We expect to regain communications with them about 7 minutes later, but we're still getting great views right now.
I love this view over their shoulders because you can see what our pilot and commander can see. They're continuing to follow along with Dragon's progress. As Leah mentioned, we have designed the spacecraft to be completely autonomous. Dragon is flying itself, so they are able to monitor along with everything that's going on. I also want to momentarily point out on the bottom of your screen there, you have some graphical interfaces there that represent the speed and the altitude. And it looks like we've lost our views there as that, we are now entering the period of anticipated loss of signal. This is where, as Leah mentioned, the plasma is beginning to build up on the exterior of the capsule as we expect. This happens with every spacecraft reentry for Dragon, and so this lasts just a few minutes. But I want to momentarily note that there on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you can actually see something pretty cool where when one of the Draco thrusters ignite to fire and help steer the spacecraft, you will actually see that they're represented on the interface there. Now, the four in the middle, those are representing the four forward Draco thrusters. We won't see those ignite at all because those were last utilized in the 13-minute deorbit burn that we completed earlier. Those are located under the nose cone, which has been closed, locked, and secured. So everything that you'll be seeing are the thrusters that are located on the side of our spacecraft, and that is enabling Dragon to fly itself home to its predetermined splashdown site off the coast of San Diego, California. For about a minute and a half until we have that atmospheric reentry. Once again, if you're in Southern California, head on outside and look up. There's a good chance that you might be able to actually see Dragon streak across the sky, look toward about the north and the west. As we mentioned before, we have entered a communications blackout period, which lasts about 7 minutes due to the plasma formation on the exterior of the capsule. We've got about 5 minutes remaining until we believe we can acquire that signal again. Now, during this time, no vehicle telemetry is received by Mission Control or the recovery team, and no external commanding of the vehicle or voice communication is possible. But like I was saying, Dragon is designed to fly itself. During this reentry, the vehicle will be slowing down from its orbital velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour, and it's slowing down. The atmosphere is really doing a lot of the work in conjunction with that heat shield to dispel that velocity. That results in heat, and that is why we have this plasma building up on the exterior of the spacecraft. It'll slow down to about 350 miles per hour, thanks to thanks to the heat shield and the atmosphere. And so at that point, we'll deploy the drogue parachutes. But during reentry, the top temperature that Dragon experiences will be about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty warm on the outside, but there is cool nitrox air being flowed through the suits that each crew member is wearing. So we ensure that they remain comfortable during this brief journey through the atmosphere.
Now, while we await AOS, or acquisition of signal, let's go through a brief recap of today's events. Hatch closure took place at 2:29 p.m. Central Time after all 4 crew members floated into Dragon for their ride home. They took time to configure the spacecraft cabin, put on their suits, and get seated ahead of undocking, which occurred at 4:20 p.m. Central. Dragon's departure burns helped move it out of the keep-out sphere and approach ellipsoid, which are both invisible boundaries we monitor around the space station. Since then, we completed the deorbit burn at 1:51. Oh, and you're getting your first views of reentry. This is live, and if you're in California, you can go see this with your own eyes. This is Crew-11 re-entering after 167 days in space. Again, we are in a loss of signal period. This is a tracked period as the spacecraft re-enters Earth's atmosphere. We anticipate regaining signal with Crew-11 momentarily, and when the spacecraft reaches an altitude of 18,000 feet above Earth, 2 drogue chutes will deploy to slow it down ahead of the 4 main parachutes deploying at 6,000 feet in altitude. Now, splashdown will be the milestone we will see after that, which is expected for 2:41 a.m. Central Time. So again, we're standing by for acquisition of signal and continued communication with Crew-11, expecting that just a few minutes from now.
Dragon SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon, loud and clear.
We have you the same, loud and clear. Expect automated chute deployment.
Copy, automated chute deploy expected.
All right, so there we heard that we had confirmation of that acquisition of signal, or AOS. It actually came in a minute early, so that's good news there. We heard the core inform the crew to expect drogue parachute deployment that happens when Dragon senses the right speed and altitude. So that's roughly about 350 miles per hour and around 18,000 feet in altitude. There we have a view from...
GPS converged. Expect nominal altitude for drogue chute deploy.
Dragon copies, expecting nominal altitude.
So we'll have that drogue deploy in about a minute from now, but we have our first views from the WB-57. This is a high-altitude tracking plane that is providing these thermal signatures via infrared. This is really cool to see here as we continue to track Dragon on its way back to planet Earth. So momentarily, we expect for visual and...
Brace for drogue window.
Cruise brace.
Dragon has safed the propulsion system as we anticipate drogue deployment any moment now. Drogue parachutes are utilized to stabilize and decelerate the vehicle further prior to deployment of the main parachutes. Drogue should be deploying here in a couple seconds, and mains will follow in about 1 minute. There we have visual confirmation of drogue deploy.
Visual, 2 healthy drogues.
Kind of a cool shot.
Copies.
I think we had the recovery vessel in the background there just momentarily. Main parachutes deploying in about 20 seconds. The main parachutes deploy when the vehicle is about 119 miles per hour and around 6,000 feet. There we can see visual confirmation of deployment of the 4 mains.
Visual, 4 healthy mains.
These main parachutes help decelerate the spacecraft even further. So they deploy around 119 miles per hour, and they'll decelerate it down to about 15, 16 miles per hour. And that will be the speed in which the spacecraft is traveling upon splashdown. Once again, we're anticipating splashdown at 12:41 a.m.
Meters.
Copy, 1,000.
We'll now begin to hear Crew-11 Commander Zena Cardman call out the altitude from her seat there in Dragon Endeavour. SpaceX's mission control team in Hawthorne continues to report the precise landing coordinates to the recovery team.
800.
Copy, 800.
Those main parachutes now fully reefed or inflated. We ensure that the parachutes inflate over a few seconds to help reduce the shock to the system.
600 meters.
Copy, 600.
All around great views of Dragon Endeavour as it continues its way back to Earth.
Copy, 400. Crew are braced.
Standing by for splashdown. Splashdown of Crew-11. After 167 days in space, Dragon and NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kim Yayoi of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov are back on Earth.
Dragon, SpaceX, we see splashdown.
SpaceX Dragon, copy, concur. Splashdown and mains are cut. We are in 4.800.
SpaceX copies, and we see the same. Mains cut. On behalf of SpaceX and NASA, welcome home, Crew-11.
SpaceX Dragon, it's so good to be home. With deep gratitude to the teams who got us there and back.
vehicle safety verifications in progress. We'll report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Dragon copies.
Again, we have splashdown of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission, a 167-day mission, 165 of those being spent on board the International Space Station, now splashing down off the coast of California. That splashdown coming right on time at 2:41 a.m. Central Time. The SpaceX recovery ship and team has been waiting for Dragon splashdown, and they will now begin making their way to the splashdown location. It looks like we even have a couple of visitors around the spacecraft. If you look very closely, you might even see some dolphins. Again, a return by the books for Crew-11, having splashed down at 2:41 a.m. Central Time off the coast of California. We will now begin moving into the recovery process. We'll see the boats begin to approach and inspect the spacecraft by checking for hypergol and other ordnance checks. They will begin to rig the spacecraft and prepare it to be lifted on that recovery ship. And this is a great view of some of those boats that go out and check the spacecraft. They are going to be sniffing it, essentially, for these hazardous fuels that can linger once the spacecraft has re-entered Earth's atmosphere.
SpaceX Dragon, 4.800, Section 3. We are in Stable 1.
SpaceX copies. Stable 1.
That's the voice of NASA astronaut and commander of Crew-11, Zena Cardman, reporting back that they are working through their procedures and that the capsule is in Stable 1, which is the position that you see on your screen here, where it is upright in the water. This is just what we were hoping for, and again, it's been a completely nominal and by-the-books return for the crew today. This is a live view of Crew-11 aboard Dragon from the SpaceX recovery vehicle, or from the SpaceX recovery ship. And this day for the crew started about 10.5 hours ago when they undocked from the International Space Station. SpaceX recovery teams have been given the go to approach.
SpaceX is go for recovery personnel to approach. Expect personnel alongside in 1 minute.
Copy, 1 minute. Thank you.
And you just heard that call out from the Corps in Hawthorne, California, to the crew aboard Dragon, that the SpaceX personnel who have been in the general vicinity of Dragon's anticipated splashdown location now have the go to approach the spacecraft and begin that recovery process.
All right, so as we heard, we are now standing by for recovery of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft with NASA astronaut Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kimia Yui of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, who are inside that spacecraft that you see there. Now, Dragon has already, I would also like to point out, we've got some folks here are approaching the spacecraft now that they have gotten the okay for the approach. They're on some fast boats there. This is the SpaceX recovery team. Personally, one of my favorite teams to work with here at SpaceX. They're a really scrappy crew, and they're going to work really quickly here to get the Crew-11 team out of the water. And it's always a lot of fun to watch these operations proceed. Now, Dragon has already autonomously completed several steps to safe itself following splashdown. For those of you that perhaps just joined us, the return has gone very smoothly so far, as Leah had mentioned. The Dragon successfully splashed down off the coast of San Diego, California at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern time. Approximately 10.5 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, which was the deorbit burn, and that placed itself on a trajectory toward Southern California, specifically off the coast of San Diego. So Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. So we're now going to follow the final part of the crew's journey as the Dragon spacecraft is lifted out of the water and placed on the recovery boat. So we see here the recovery team beginning to prepare. One of the most important steps will be to
Dragon SpaceX, hypergol sweeps and unfired ordnance checks, nominal. Rigging in progress, approximately 25 minutes until capsule lift. Stand by for PMC. The next call you hear will be from SpaceX flight surgeon on Dragon to Ground Private.
Dragon copies. 25 minutes until lift. Standing by for PMC.
All right, we heard there that the crew will have an opportunity for a private medical conference with the flight surgeon. That is standard for all of our crew returns. That will be done on a private channel. Great view here from the drone. This is our first look at the front side of Dragon Endeavour. I love this view because you can see the lights on the inside. This crew member here is actually on the capsule, beginning to place the rigging required for the lift onto the large recovery vessel. This takes a few minutes to essentially lasso and wrangle the Dragon capsule as it gently bobs there in the water. Not in the picture, there is another fast boat that is recovering the parachutes from the water. Those were automatically cut or released from Dragon upon splashdown, and we retrieved those from the water. This fast boat here is helping to assist the rigging of the required straps and equipment for the spacecraft recovery.
Dragon SpaceX, Dragon to Ground is no longer privatized.
Dragon copies.
SpaceX recovery team continues to maneuver around Dragon Endeavour as we continue progress of placing the recovery straps required in order to safely lift the spacecraft out of the water. Something we heard called out earlier prior to the closest approach that we see now was completion of the safety sweeps. That was just indicating that the recovery team performed the required checks to ensure that there weren't any unfired pyros, which are used to...
Dragon, be advised, transitioning forward link. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Earlier, prior to atmospheric reentry, we heard SpaceX Core report to the crew during the, during the entry brief that recovery conditions were almost pristine, and he was not joking. It seems that the weather, the waves are pretty smooth out there. And Leah mentioned earlier that there are some dolphins out to play as well. Perhaps we might be able to get to see those as the recovery vessel gets a little closer to the spacecraft. On your screen now are our operators at SpaceX Mission Control. They continue to monitor Dragon Endeavour during these recovery operations, as well as communicate directly to the recovery team. Everything is carefully coordinated within our procedures, and here you see folks that are responsible for individual portions to ensure that everything is executed as planned. If you've just recently joined us, we had a perfectly nominal re-entry of Dragon Endeavour. The crew splashed down exactly on time at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time off the coast of San Diego. The recovery team has arrived at the splashdown location and are placing the required straps onto the Dragon spacecraft. The crew are safely inside. Nobody is allowed to pass go just yet. We still have to lift the spacecraft out of the water and onto our recovery vessel.
Dragon SpaceX, forward link transition complete. Comm check.
We've got you loud and clear.
We have you the same.
Hopefully we'll be able to bring those views of the recovery team back. But at this point, I can share that one member of the recovery team is still, oh, there we can see our recovery vessel continuing to approach Dragon Endeavour there in its splashdown location. We still have one recovery team member working to apply the rigging to the capsule. You can see that work ongoing there. As we've seen, this involves climbing on top of the spacecraft itself to attach these hoist rings and connect the lifting lines. Overall, the progress tonight has been very smooth and very rapid. Depending on the sea state, it can take us a little bit longer, but things are really smooth this evening, and the recovery team is very efficient. It takes us less than an hour to raise Dragon onto the recovery vessel and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After initial medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter. So everything continuing to proceed as scheduled and as anticipated. The ring that you see there on the deck of the, of the recovery vessel, that is what we refer to as the nest. That is where the Dragon Once lifted out of the water using the hydraulic lift there at the aft end of the recovery vessel, the Dragon spacecraft will be lifted and placed into that nest, and that nest will then be translated forward on the recovery vessel up to where the egress the egress bay is located. Yeah, so this is a great view there of the recovery team member that is responsible for placing the hoist straps and the rigging required to lift the the Dragon spacecraft out of the water, along with the recovery team members located in the fast boat, helping to provide the necessary light, as this is obviously a nighttime splashdown operation. We've done several of these before. As you can see there, the sea state is super calm, and I'm assuming some really nice conditions to be working in right now. Over time, we can see the primary recovery vessel. This is our recovery vessel Shannon, named after, of course, Shannon Walker, who flew on Crew-1. She is the first female astronaut to fly in our Dragon spacecraft. So we have this vessel named after her. And we can see Shannon slowly but surely getting closer and closer to Dragon Endeavour as it patiently waits there in the glass-like water. Once all the required straps and rings are in place and the recovery vessel is in its location and everything is attached, we'll actually see that recovery team member jump off from the capsule and into the water. It's one of my favorite moments of the recovery process. I think we might, yep, there they are. The dolphins are back to play. We now have a better view of them. I'm sure they're very intrigued by all the lights that are in the area here in the middle of the night in Southern California. If you've just recently joined us, you're tuning in at a great time. We're in the final phases of the Crew-11 return to Earth. They had an on-time splashdown at 12:41 a.m. Pacific time, 3:41 a.m. Eastern time. And as you can see, recovery operations are proceeding very well. everything is everything is going according to plan, or as we like to say around here, nominal. And we can see the recovery vessel continues to approach Dragon Endeavour, and the recovery team there on the vessel standing by as we await the hoist of the Dragon spacecraft onto the aft end of the vessel. I can say once we make the final approach here to the Dragon spacecraft, the hoisting actually happens. It always takes me by surprise just how fast it is, because you can't really see the full size of the hydraulic lift or hoist there at the aft end of the recovery vessel, but it's pretty big and pretty strong. So we're able to lift the spacecraft out of the water. We can see there that the lines, the guidelines are attached, and they're going to line everything up here for the final approach and ultimately the lift into the nest there located at the back of the vessel.
Now, as you can see, the recovery teams are preparing to lower the vessel's hydraulic lift mechanism, and that's going to bring the spacecraft into the on-deck translation system, also known as the nest. Dragon will remain in the nest during crew extraction and then for the journey back to port. Again, all of this coming right after splashdown at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, right on time, and a really expedient recovery, partially thanks to the calm sea states and great weather that is out in the San Diego area right now, but also due to the swift and very well skilled and practiced efforts of the NASA and SpaceX recovery teams. The spacecraft is now being lifted. It'll be set on the nest and centered. It'll be oriented so that the side hatch is facing forward for the crew to egress. It'll be moved into the hangar underneath that helipad that you see illuminated in green on the top of the ship, and then pulled towards the mezzanine area so that the crew can be helped outside of the hatch. Once open, a SpaceX medical doctor will be the first to check in on Cardman. Fink, Yui, and Platonov are Crew-11 crew members and see if they're ready for egress or exiting the vehicle. This is a standard procedure for all of our crew returns. This view coming from the recovery vessel, as you see Dragon, and at the very bottom, that is the nest in which we were discussing, and that's where Dragon will remain now and all the way back to port. You can also see, facing forward, that is Dragon's side hatch we were discussing. This is the same hatch they used to enter the spacecraft on launch day in August. And of course, this is different from the top hatch. You can not see that because it's underneath the nose cone at the very top of the spacecraft. We've been following along all the way through deorbit burn and nose cone closure tonight. That top hatch underneath the nose cone is what the astronauts and cosmonaut used to enter and exit the International Space Station while Dragon was docked. So before we open this side hatch, the spacecraft's cabin pressure must be equalized with the outside environment. And of course, once that hatch is open, this will be the crew's first breath of fresh air back on Earth since boarding their spacecraft at the start of their journeys back in August. Again, a very by-the-book return.
Platform.
Dragon copies.
Now, that voice speaking with the astronauts and cosmonaut on the Dragon spacecraft is still coming from the core in SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. These team members are making sure that all thrusters are covered before they begin to maneuver the spacecraft toward that egress platform. We'll be standing by live the entire time. This is the 6th flight of this spacecraft. In all, Endeavour has flown 9 NASA astronauts, 3 visitors to the International Space Station, 2 Roscosmos cosmonauts, 1 retired NASA astronaut, 1 ESA astronaut, and an Emirati astronaut from the UAE to and from the International Space Station. Again, this is the 6th mission for this Dragon spacecraft named Endeavour. First launching on May 30th, 2020 to the International Space Station. And if you remember that date, that was the historic Demo 2 mission for the Commercial Crew Program, carrying NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. What you're seeing here are SpaceX team members. They are preparing the vehicle to be moved to that egress platform, making sure everything is safe, that the rigging is properly attached. This is really the final ride on Dragon for these Crew-11 crew members. One short trip to this egress platform, and then they'll begin being assisted out of the spacecraft. Completely normal procedures for all of our returns. And this is a live view from Mission Control in Houston, Texas, the International Space Station Flight Control Room. We have some additional visitors beyond the usual flight controllers and flight directors that staff this room 24/7. In the center of your screen, you'll see NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman speaking with team members, specifically right now the Spartan flight controller. Isaacman is, of course, an accomplished astronaut himself, having flown on 2 missions aboard Dragon, so he is familiar with these procedures and what the crew might be experiencing right now. Back on the recovery ship, the teams continue to prepare to move Dragon to that egress platform. We'll get ready to officially welcome home the Crew-11 astronauts and cosmonaut. Again, that's NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, JAXA's astronaut Kimya Yui, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, wrapping up a 167-day in space for these crew members. Again, if you're just joining us, thanks for tuning in. This is the live mission coverage of NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission returning from the International Space Station back to Earth. As you can see, this is the Dragon spacecraft, and splashdown occurred at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, right on time. This crew undocked at 4:20 p.m. Central Time, so it was about a 9.5-hour ride from space back to Earth. They wrapped up 165 days aboard the International Space Station, 167 days in total for this mission. And we are seeing motion for Dragon. They are pulling it to the egress platform. It's a short distance, and this view coming from that platform itself. This will align it properly with the side hatch, where we will see the astronauts egress or exit the capsule. They will be assisted after being checked on by a medical doctor, and this is standard procedure for all of our returning crews. We are getting confirmation that the spacecraft hatch is ready to be
Dragon
opened. Again, this will be the first time.
Stand by for side hatch opening and egress. It's been an honor flying with you.
Standing by for side hatch, and the honor is ours. Thank you so much.
Good words from the Corps in SpaceX Mission Control to the crew. Again, with this side hatch open, this is the first breath of fresh air that this crew has gotten in 167 days since their launch back in August. That hatch opening coming at 3:19 a.m. Central Time, and with a splashdown occurring at 2:41 a.m. Central Time, a pretty rapid access of the crew. As previously discussed, the first team member to check on the crew is a SpaceX medical doctor, just giving them a once-over, making sure everyone's feeling all right and ready to exit the spacecraft. This is something we do with all crew members who return. And getting a quick picture inside the capsule is NASA photographer Bill Ingalls. Hey, there's your live view inside Dragon Crew-11 back on Earth after 167 days in space. Again, next on the checklist for tonight is crew egress or exit. Team members will be assisting them as they are helped out of the spacecraft. Again, it's been 167 days since they were back on Earth, so our standard procedure will be followed here as well, where they are assisted out of the spacecraft and placed on essentially a gurney, and then they will receive some medical checks aboard the ship before flying back to land. Team members inside the spacecraft from SpaceX's recovery team are helping remove some of those extra items that are in the spacecraft. You just saw the footrests being handed off. This will just make it easier for us to bring the crew out of the spacecraft. Just over 40 minutes since our crew splashed down off the coast of San Diego. Again, that coming at 2:41 a.m. Central Time. We are expecting to see them exiting the spacecraft very soon. That's the chair the crew members will be helped into and moved back for their initial medical checks. Again, standard procedure for any returns on Dragon, as well as any of our crew members returning. If you've ever watched a crew return on a Soyuz spacecraft, we have a similar process where astronauts are carried from the capsule to waiting chairs and then carried again to a nearby medical tent. Again, you're watching live coverage of Crew-11's mission and return from the International Space Station, having undocked at 4:20 p.m. Central Time on January 14th, just yesterday, and splashing down at 2:41 a.m. Central Time today, January 15th. We are now just awaiting the crew to be helped out of the spacecraft. And it looks like our first crew member out of the spacecraft is NASA astronaut Mike Fink. Yes, that's the pilot of the Crew-11 mission aboard Dragon. Fink now being taken to those standard medical checks. And since we just saw Mike Fink, it's worth noting he now has 549 total days in space. That's the fourth all-time most days for NASA astronauts. Standing by for our next crew member to exit the spacecraft. That's NASA astronaut Xena Cardman, wrapping up her first mission to space, commander of the Crew-11 spacecraft. That's another footrest being handed out of the capsule, and we'll be standing by to see who is next to be brought out of the spacecraft. Again, you see them being helped onto these stretchers. They are being escorted back to their routine medical checks. Our next crew member to exit the spacecraft is JAXA's astronaut Kimya Yui. Yui just reached the milestone of 300 days in space across 2 missions. You can see some cheering on the SpaceX recovery ship, and you can probably also hear a little bit of celebration here in Mission Control Houston as well. That's another foot restraint, or a foot rest, I should say, being brought out of the spacecraft, clearing the way for our final crew member to exit, and that will be Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. And we see the fourth crew member of Crew-11 being helped from the vehicle now. That is Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov, also wrapping up his first mission to space. Now that NASA astronauts Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Kim Yayoi of JAXA, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov are safely back home on Earth and getting checked out by the medical teams, we're going to wrap up our live coverage of their return. This crew's journey concludes following a launch on August 1st, 2025, aboard a Falcon 9 rocket to the International Space Station. It was the fourth flight for Fink, who now has 549 days in space, the second for Yui with 309 days in space, and the first flight for Cardman and Platonov, who now have 167 days in space. With their mission coming to an end, the crew began packing up their research and personal items for their return to Earth last week. The Soyuz MS-28 crew, including NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kutsverchkov and Sergei Mikheyev, remain aboard the space station and will continue their mission through this summer. Crew-12 is currently scheduled to launch as soon as mid-February and will provide more information once that is available.
Great news for Crew-11. They are home. The journey back began yesterday, about 13 hours ago, when they closed the hatch to Dragon and undocked from the International Space Station at 12:29 p.m. Pacific, 3:29 p.m. Eastern. Now, during this time, the spacecraft performed a number of maneuvers in preparation for re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere, with final splashdown occurring off the coast of San Diego, California, on time at 12:41 a.m. Pacific, 3:41 a.m. Eastern. And just a little less than an hour following splashdown, we saw Zena, Mike, Oleg, and Kimia make their way out of Dragon and into the recovery ship's medical facilities, safe and sound.
We just had some great words here in Mission Control from NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, and we are still monitoring the crew as they continue their journey back to home. So after the checkouts on the ship, the crew will be flown to a local hospital for continued monitoring and checkouts using additional medical equipment not available aboard the space station. As NASA's Chief Health and Medical Officer J.D. Polk discussed last week, the crew member is stable and we were able to monitor their condition in orbit, but we want to take advantage of resources on Earth to provide the best care possible. NASA maintains relationships with local hospitals to ensure readiness for any post-landing needs, and for this return, we are utilizing that option as part of our normal preparedness process. Afterwards, the crew members will take a NASA plane for the short flight back to Houston. They'll then be reunited with families to bring an end to this mission.
Thank you, as always, for joining us for the coverage of Splashdown for Crew-11. Excuse me. Remember to follow SpaceX on X and NASA Online on social media for updates. Pardon me. Here we go. For updates for the very latest on crew and cargo flights to and from the International Space Station. That's it for us here at SpaceX Hawthorne. Go Dragon and go Crew-11.
And we'll continue to share the progress of the crew on social media as they travel back home. We also have a post-splashdown news conference coming up at 2:45 a.m. Pacific time, 5:45 a.m. Eastern time, where leadership will share the latest updates as we conclude this mission. From all of us at NASA and SpaceX, it's been an honor. Thanks for joining, and welcome home, Crew-11.
welcome to NASA's Johnson Space Center for the Crew-11 post-splashdown news conference. I'm George Alderman, NASA's Deputy Press Secretary, and I'll be moderating today's news conference. We are joined today by NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman and Joel Montalbano, Deputy Associate Administrator for NASA's Space Operations Missions Directorate. We'll be taking questions through our phone bridge, so media interested in taking a question, please press *1 to enter the queue. Before we get started, we'll begin with opening remarks from Administrator Isaacman.
Good morning, everyone. At 3:41 a.m. Eastern Time, SpaceX Dragon Endeavour spacecraft successfully splashed down off the coast of California in pristine weather. This mission brought Crew-11 safely home. NASA astronauts Zena Cardman, Mike Fink, JAXA astronaut Kimye Yui, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov are all safe and in good spirits. All crew members are currently undergoing the routine post-splashdown medical evaluation. The crew member of concern is doing fine. We will share updates on their health as soon as it's appropriate to do so. Over the past 5 months aboard the International Space Station, Crew-11 completed a series of demanding and productive mission objectives. The crew spent more than 850 hours on scientific studies, including research on bone loss and microgravity, and the long-term storage of cryogenic fluids in space with direct applications in medical and industrial fields. This work advanced our understanding of long-duration spaceflight and contributed valuable research that benefit life here on Earth and further human exploration. To be overwhelmingly clear, Crew-11 was a very successful mission. While this was the first time we had to return crew slightly ahead of schedule, NASA was ready. The team responded quickly and professionally, as did the teams across the agency, working closely with our commercial partners, and executed a very safe return. This is exactly why we train, and this is NASA at its finest. Spaceflight will always carry some degree of uncertainty. That is the nature of exploration. Fundamentally, it's why we're in space, to learn. It's why NASA prepares for the unexpected, so we are ready to respond decisively and safely. The successful return of Crew-11 is a direct result of that preparation. I want to personally thank the teams across NASA, SpaceX, our international partners who made this possible. Your professionalism, discipline, and commitment to crew safety were on full display. Because of your work, 4 astronauts are home, safe, and will soon be reunited with their families. You did this while making preparations for Crew-12, for Artemis II, and doing the other things at NASA while we pursue our great mission of science and discovery. Well done. Now I'll turn it over to Joel Montalbano, Deputy Associate Administrator for Space Operations Mission Directorate.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you again for joining us on this Dragon Crew-11 splashdown press brief. Just a couple things, awesome landing. We had the winds at the landing site were less than 3 knots. The wave period was very small. I think we saw about a 2.5 foot, but just extremely perfect landing opportunity today. And it was awesome to see the team take advantage of it and work towards this. It was just about a week ago that the decision was made to bring this crew home early. I can tell you we use the standard processes, the nominal landing support from NASA, SpaceX, the international partners. The team meticulously went through all the processes to get ready for landing, and we executed the same processes and same landing support that we would have done if we brought this crew home in late February. So just a huge thanks to everybody, and you saw the result of that today. This crew was in space just under 170 days. They performed a little less than 900 hours of science experiments on board. Those are hands-on science experiments. And that encompassed about 140 different experiments. They saw 5 spacecraft arrive, 3 spacecraft depart. And the work we did on the International Space Station for this expedition, as well as others, benefits humanity on Earth. It benefits and teaches us for exploration, for what we're going to use in the Artemis program as we go back to the moon and to Mars. Just a huge effort across the board by the team. In closing, I want to just thank the team. I'll do say one thing, that we did make a decision prior to today, a couple of days earlier, that we were bringing the crew to a medical facility in the San Diego, off the San Diego area. And so the crew will stay there. They'll stay there overnight, and we expect to bring the crew back to Houston on Friday, obviously pending the medical. And, we do this, we bring the crew there, we do the medical activities that Dr. Polk talked about with you a couple days ago, things we can only do on Earth. We're also doing the post-flight data collection on this crew. Every crew has a number of things that they've signed up for. We collect the data, and we use that to learn, help us in exploration. Also to give the crew some rest, right? It's been a busy time for them. We've been working them extremely hard throughout the expedition. It's been a long day. Give them some rest, everything with that. They'll be staying overnight. So with that, I'll hand it back over to George.
Great. And with that, we'll move into questions. Our first question comes from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
And with that, we'll move into questions. Our first question comes from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Yeah, hey, it's Bill Harwood. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Oh, thank you very much. I've got a Crew-12 Artemis II question since Crew-11's on the ground and you're looking at moving up Crew. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some crosstalk. Are y'all hearing me okay? Bill Harwood, can you guys hear me?
We hear you reasonably well.
All right, want me to try again?
We were getting your question. If you want to complete it.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's a Crew-12 Artemis II question, and with 11 down on the ground and Crew-12 being accelerated, I guess what I'm wondering is what sort of separation you need between Artemis II and Crew-12 in terms of support crew staging. You've got comms with DSN and TDRS and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there must be some minimum separation to avoid the kind of overlap that would prevent that. And it looks like you're really trying to do it. You're trying to get Artemis II off in the February window. But if you move up Crew-12, there has to be some minimum separation, I would think. I'm just wondering how realistic it is both of those missions can get off in early February. Thanks.
Well, maybe I can start, and Joel, if you want to give maybe some of the technical components to that, like on comms and such. I would just say that this is exactly what we should be doing at NASA. I mean, we have the means as an agency, and it should be expected of our agency, to be able to bring our astronauts home at any time as required under circumstances like this, which is exactly what we did today with Crew-11, while making preparations to pull forward our next mission like Crew-12, while also progressing on our Artemis II campaign for what is going to be probably one of the most important human spaceflight missions in the last half century. I mean, I took a briefing a couple weeks ago on what happens in that what I would describe as the extremely unlikely event that we need to use 2 suit-up rooms at nearly the same time. And I was like, what a great problem it would be for the agency to have that. Now, what I would say is every one of these campaigns, while there is some overlap of some personnel and roles, are parallel efforts. We bring our crew home. We make preparations for our next crew to the International Space Station with Crew-12. We continue to go through the motions with Artemis II, of which we've already stated we are not going to specify, which launch date we are going to pursue within the already published windows until we have Artemis II out at the pad and we get through a wet dress to give us the confidence. So at this point, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't continue along those parallel paths. And if it comes down to a point in time where we have to deconflict between 2 human spaceflight missions, that is a very good problem to have at NASA.
You're exactly right. That's exactly what we're doing. The commercial crew and ISS program are working to look at, what we can accelerate. You have to back up a few days from your picked launch date, as you know, for static fire, and then you have to do some reconfiguration at Kennedy Space Center in order to support from the Artemis work to the static fire. And so we'll lay out all those timelines, look at how everything's going, and then make the decision as we get a little closer. The teams are already looking, stripping down, what makes sense, what we can do.
And our next question will come from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Hello, good morning. I'm wondering, is the ailing astronaut doing better or worse than before, or did they need extra help getting home? And I'm wondering, is the crew at the hospital yet? Thanks.
As I mentioned in my prepared remarks, all crew members right now are they're safe. They're in good spirits. They're going through the standard post-splashdown medical checks. I believe the helicopter, if it hasn't left the recovery ship, it's imminent to do so, and they're all going to the hospital as we had determined days ago as the proper thing to do under the circumstances. But as I mentioned, the crew member in question specifically is doing fine.
And with that, our next question will come from Jeff Faust with Space News.
Good morning. I know a formal lessons learned process will come later, but over the last week, has anything come to mind of things that you would do differently if this were to happen again in the future? For example, different procedures, different medical equipment on the station, things like that. Any lessons that have come up in the last week? Thank you.
You know, the team's going to take a look at what happened. And right now, nothing has really jumped out. Like I said, we were able to use the standard process for the undocking work and the landing work, moving, you know, all the teams over to the West Coast, the NASA team, SpaceX team, the international partners. SpaceX did a lot of work to get us ready. They did some practice runs with the helicopter to the hospital. We contacted the hospital in advance to make sure they were ready, went over everything. Part of the lessons learned and what we do as part of the next flight readiness review for each mission is to review lessons learned from the past missions. So we'll do that, and then those lessons will be carried forward.
Yeah, I would just layer onto this and say that it is standard process to conduct a thorough debrief, and oftentimes people associate that with what did we get wrong, and for sure in any circumstance you're going to capture lessons learned and apply it. I think when we go through the debrief on this, we're gonna learn a lot about the things we got we got right and did it very well, and make sure we apply that. You know, in other applications going forward. So this, from my perspective, watching it play out from the time of the original situation developing to get our astronauts safely in the water and on their way to medical care, was executed almost near flawlessly.
Our next question will be from Joey Roulette with Reuters.
Hey, thank you. Question for Jared or Joel. NASA, of course, has said the astronaut has been doing fine and is stable. But was the astronaut never not in a stable condition throughout all of this? And then a second quick question, I'm wondering if this medical experience will inform any kind of research or be published in any paper after all this. Thanks.
I think without going into specifics beyond what was already shared, obviously we took this action because it was a serious medical condition, right? You know, in that respect, it was a serious situation. The astronaut in question is fine right now, good spirits, and going through the proper, you know, the proper medical checkouts. Really have much more to add than that.
And our next question will come from Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Hi, all. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us this morning. To either the administrator or to Joel, before this medical issue came up, the plan for station was for the cargo Dragon for Sierra 33 to undock about a day or so after the spacewalk that was planned for today. Will that Dragon remain at station until Crew 12 arrives? And then just a quick logistics question for Crew 12's launch. Has a date been selected for that, and will he be flying off pad 40 or 39A? Thanks.
All right, there were a handful of those in there. We're flying the Crew 12 off of Space Launch Complex 40. And from a standpoint, this is what we're going to spend the next few days on, picking a new date for the SpaceX 33 undock, the HTVX unberth, and then how does that work with respect to Crew 12. The teams will look at it and see what makes sense, which one to go first. But that's open work and forward work for us. Be probably next week before we get some answers on that.
And our next question will be from Anthony Leone with Spectrum News.
Hello, and thank you very much for taking our questions this morning. You said that the astronaut suffered a serious medical condition. Would that be enough to prevent him or her from going back into space and doing another mission on the ISS?
Yeah, I would think it's incredibly premature to even consider that right now. The highest priority is the health and welfare of our crew members. They just executed a near perfect mission on orbit. So I said that during the initial press conference that I think regardless of the phase of flight we were in on the the timeline on the expedition, we would have arrived at the same conclusion. What Crew-11 did to make this so much easier is executing so well on all of their scientific objectives. So in that case, the crew did a fantastic job, and I think that would reflect well on future crew selection criteria.
Our next question will come from Jackie Waddles with CNN.
Hi, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. So question about ISS operations while we wait for Crew-12 to arrive. I was curious, what training the cosmonauts have to assist with any operations on the U.S. side. I think I understood at least one cosmonaut may have training on NASA EVA suits, for example, if there's a hardware issue that requires an emergency spacewalk. Could y'all give us some insight into that situation? Thanks so much.
Sure. Generally, what we do where we are today is we do emergency training with each crew. So the Russian cosmonauts come over to Houston. We do emergency training. Our U.S. astronauts go over to Moscow and do emergency training there. Sergei Kudzevertkov does have some basic EVA training. Our plan, if we had, there's not anything on space station where you have a single hardware failure that requires you to take immediate action. You always have a second piece of hardware. There are some things that we'd like to take action pretty quick, and right now the plan would be just to wait for the Crew-12 crew to get up there if we had to do any spacewalks. Inside, we spent some extra time this last week in training Chris Williams up on some things that he hadn't been trained on. And so the handover from Crew-11 to Chris, that took a little extra time, which also added to why we waited the 7 or 8 days. So that's helped. The cosmonauts, we can get them training in real time if we need their help on certain activities. So I believe we're covered, and ready to answer any other questions.
Next question will come from Claire Cameron with the Scientific American.
Hi there. I have a couple of questions. One, you mentioned, Mr. Isaacman, that the agency will release information about the nature of the crew member's medical issue at a future time. Is there a timeline for that? And then also, how will this incident, if at all, inform the agency's preparation for the Artemis crewed missions? Will there be changes to the medical protocols, both for pre-flight and during mission?
Well, I think first, I actually don't believe that I said, I know the question before of what information we would share. First, we are very committed to being transparent, but this is there are some medical privacy considerations here. That said, to the extent that we are in a position to share more information publicly and have the necessary consents, we would do so. I would say almost assuredly we would share information across other space agencies and commercial space providers. I mean, this is why we're there to learn. And things that could have implications on the health and wellness of crew members is vitally important to all those that undertake these type of missions. In terms of preparation for subsequent missions, whether it's on the International Space Station or on Artemis II, we're always learning here. I mean, that again is why we put our astronauts in this environment. I would say that there are a lot of circumstances, an incredible amount that we can train and prepare for to treat on orbit. And the International Space Station has exceptional capabilities. Our vehicles, be that Dragon or Orion, Starliner, have medical kits. There are some circumstances that will develop where you're going to want the option to come home. And we build that into our flight plans. There are early return options on Artemis II. There are options to bring astronauts back from the space station in hours, not days. So I think that the fact that we did take some extra time in here does speak to the stability of the situation, how well everyone responded to it. So this is what we trained for. It's built in our planning. It was executed very well. We will capture any relevant lessons learned to inform preparations for subsequent missions. But I think we're in pretty good shape right now.
Our next question will come from Mark Carreau with Aviation Week and Space Technology.
Yes, thank you. My question is whether the medical issues surfaced as a result of the research medically that you're doing aboard the space station, or did this something arise that wasn't connected with a research discovery, but something maybe more immediate?
I mean, the only thing that we've commented on, Dr. Polk spoke about specifically during the press conference, is in Dr. Polk's medical opinion, this was unrelated to any operational environments on space station. I think that question was framed with respect to EVA, even though even those preparations may not have even been applicable for a crew member. But I think, like, if we're expanding it to something even broader than operational preparations and any of the potential research interactions, I would say we don't know at this point. I mean, this is something that could have happened on Earth, completely outside the microgravity environment at that point. I don't think we know that versus just being in microgravity versus potentially interactions, experiments. I just think it would be very premature to draw any conclusions or close any doors at this point.
Next question will be from Jackie Goddard with The Times of London.
Yes, hello, thank you. I wondered if you could speak a little about the emotional side of all this. Obviously, we saw 4 very stoic astronauts keeping their spirits up, but the disappointment of cutting short a mission was described by Mike Fink as bittersweet. Could you just talk us through sort of how you support that psychological side and that sort of emotional element to how you support the astronauts through that? Thank you.
Well, you know, any time you have an activity that you plan to complete and you get cut short, obviously it affects you a little bit. These astronauts are incredible. We have some of the best trained astronauts, and not just NASA, across the international partnership. So they prepared, they talk about they know that they could have a situation on orbit that could bring them home early. And so it's how you pick up from that and move on. And what we saw in this last week is, you know, they were sad, of course, but they were ready. They helped train Chris. They helped work with the cosmonauts. They talked to the ground on a regular basis. I would tell you they were even cracking jokes a couple times. So, you know, sad, but they're professional and they understand what happens when you fly in space.
Yeah. I would just add that they could have been on a 1-year expedition and they would probably have told you that it's bittersweet coming home. Astronauts really enjoy being in space right now, but I think they should take comfort in the fact they executed extraordinarily well on an unexpected situation, and again completed, you know, the near majority of their mission objectives on orbit. Crew-11 was a successful mission.
Next question will come from Richard Tu with the Post newspaper.
Question for Joel. The reduction in crew on station right now, how will that affect ongoing experiments, and how are those remaining experiments prioritized? Thank you.
So a lot of experiments, good question, a lot of experiments on board. There's a time element from when that experiment launched to when it needs to be complete. And so the priority will be to get as many of those time-limited experiments done. So we'll work with Chris. Chris will be prime on that. He knows if he needs help, we can get help from either the ground or from his Russian cosmonaut friends. And so, but from a standpoint of, sure, there'll be less. There's, you know, 4 less people on board space station right now. So there will be an impact, but we'll prioritize that on the time-critical science.
Next question will come from James Dowling Healy with West Hartford Community Interactive.
Good morning. James Dowling Healy, West Hartford Community Interactive. I'd just like to start by saying welcome home to Crew-11, and I'd like to extend my best wishes to the crew member for a full and speedy recovery. And also, I'd like to congratulate Mr. Isaacman on his confirmation. My question is, how will the medical event impact NASA's staffing priorities on future longer-term missions? Has the likelihood that there will have to be a medical doctor on future long-term missions increased, or will non-physician astronauts receive more medical training? Thank you.
I could start on that one. It's a good question, by the way. It's come up many times of would circumstances have played out differently had there been a physician that was still on space station? And I think generally the answer is no. That speaks to the extensive training all of the astronauts go through for medical conditions. I mean, extensive training to be prepared for this type of circumstance, which again is why Crew-11 responded so well. That said, we do have quite a few physicians that are in the astronaut corps. So you have pretty, the odds are pretty good that you'll usually have one, up there at times. But I don't think that would have changed the outcome. All that said, I think when you look at experience or qualifications, it's generally helpful for human spaceflight and for the astronaut corps, especially as we look at longer duration missions where, we're hours away potentially from returning to Earth from the International Space Station, days away from the Moon. But there will be a time that NASA will embark on missions to Mars, and in that circumstance, likely the human body is going to potentially fail before some of the technology that's enabling it, in which case having medical professionals that are available on those type of missions is additive. But I think specific to this mission, I don't think it would have changed any of the outcomes or any of our decision making.
Next question will be from Marcia Smith with spacepolicyonline.com.
Thank you so much for taking my question. You've mentioned several times that this was not an emergency, and that in an actual emergency, you could get the crew back much more quickly. And I'm just curious, how many places are there that you can land, since weather is always so difficult to predict? So you were very lucky today. You had these pristine conditions for landing. But if you had a real emergency, there must be places other than the Pacific Ocean that you can land. Can you still land, back near Florida, or where could you land in an emergency?
Yeah, so we have the ability to land almost anywhere in the world. We have an agreement with the U.S. military to be there within 24 hours of a landing with PJs to assist the crew. And so we do have multiple opportunities. Now, it also can depend on why you're undocking, right? So if you have a space station emergency and you're undocking because of that, you can wait. There's time, and you can just stay in orbit. The Dragon vehicle has a capability of about 5 days of reflight. You use about a day-ish going up, so you do have some time. If it's a medical thing and you need to get home, you'd come home anywhere in the world, and we'd use the U.S. military to get to them as quickly as we can, and then from that, we'd figure out what the next steps would be.
Yeah, I mean, that does speak again to, the stability of the situation, because you do have the capability to get in the water within hours. You just ideally want to be in the water in a situation where you can actually help the crew members. So certainly being in the middle of the Pacific or Atlantic doesn't serve us very well. But we can constantly evaluate splashdown locations with acceptable weather that might be in international locations, but could get a crew member to medical care urgently if necessary. And we're constantly assessing that. It wasn't necessary, obviously, in these circumstances.
Next question will be from Manuel Mazzanti with Exploración Espacial.
Thank you so much, Manuel Mazzanti, Exploración Espacial. The main reason for bringing Crew-11 in an anticipated way was to try to have further medical exams on this crew member that was not feeling well. I wonder, are these medical evaluations going to be led by NASA or some other institution? Thank you.
And so we'll partner with our flight surgeons have specific training in aerospace medicine, and so they are the leads. We work with the hospitals prior to each landing to kind of brief them on on a conditioned astronaut when they come back. And so it'll be led by our flight surgeons, but we'll obviously, with the hospital in California, we'll be using their resources, so we'll be working cooperatively.
Our next question comes from Brett Tingley with space.com.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to do this after what was a long night for you all. This is a question for Jared Isaacman. I'm wondering, having been on multiple space flights yourself, how did those experiences inform how you approach this situation? And what was it like being in your current role now, watching re-entry, splashdown recovery, having been there yourself?
So I would just say everybody here at NASA obviously is an extraordinary amount of experience preparing for situations that never would have been applicable to any of my previous training. We obviously didn't go to the space station. So I was just happy to observe all of our plans going in motion as expected from the time the original situation developed through the successful, at least, conclusion to the spaceflight component of it today. And I would say, do obviously have a lot of experience with Dragon vehicle, and that's why I was, I think, in a position to follow along and know that we were doing things in absolutely the correct way. As for just general reactions of seeing, people that are, astronauts that are happy in space and coming home from it, sure, I think that triggers a little bit of an emotional reaction for a lot of us in the room who had been through those circumstances. To me, I think probably the best moment of all was just seeing the reactions of the families that had come here at Johnson Space Center to watch their loved ones come back safely from space.
Our next question comes from Denise Cho with NBC News.
Hi, thanks very much. I wanted to ask if there were any adjustments made to standard departure or splashdown procedures because of the medical issues, say to accommodate the needs of the affected crew member. And then are there any updates on the 2 spacewalks that obviously had to be postponed? Does this raise any new challenges on the station? Are you having to shuffle things around at all?
We did not change any of the undocking procedures. They were the standard procedures that we had planned and used. And then your second question on the EVA. So those 2 EVAs were not time critical, and so we'll roll those over to the next expedition. But again, neither of those EVAs were time critical, so we'll just roll them over.
And our final question this morning will come from Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Irene, please hit your mute button.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Are you expecting all 4 crew members will be released together at the same time from the hospital?
We would expect that to be the plan, yes.
And with that, that concludes today's news conference. Thank you to all the media who joined us and for your continued coverage. We look forward to hearing from the crew in the coming days during their own news conference. Please watch for an upcoming advisory with those details. Until then, thank you, and we'll see you next time.